All right, this one's for the Canik bros, just for you guys. So anybody who's not familiar with the Canik platform may not know that the Canik MC9 platform of guns is basically a slenderized version of the full-size guns. They take the same magazines. Well, you can use the full-size magazines in the compact ones. Compact ones won't fit in the full-size ones unless you take the base plates off. And the Canik MC9 Prime is actually a full gripped pistol. You can see that the grip comes all the way down. It takes a 17-round magazine. And if you actually arrange them, you know, top to top, you can see that while the big gun does come down a little bit longer, if the magazine were in there, they would be pretty much the same length. So it kind of begs the question, like, how do the full-size guns shoot compared to the baby guns? Do the baby guns lose a bunch of velocity? We're going to test how it shoots. We're going to test how much velocity is retained, and I'll show you just how skinny this gun is relative to this one for concealed carry. So stay tuned. All right, first things first, we got to measure velocity out of these bad boys. So obviously the Prime is going to have less velocity. I got two different loads. I've got a S&B 115 just to see how it does with 115s, and the 6-hour V-Crown jacketed hollow points to see what happens for the 124s. So let's go. That is 1147. So with the 115 S&Bs, the average is 1142.8. Combat with S&B 115s, 1165. That's an 1191.2 with the S&Bs out of the TTI Combat. So about a 50 foot per second delta from the Combat down to the Prime. Looking at the SIG V Crowns, let's go. 1140. Average is 1138 with the V Crowns from the Prime. V Crowns from the Combat. 1165. With the 124 V Crowns, it's 1176 versus 1138 from the two different guns, so about a 40 FPS fall off with the 124s. Let's put it on a rest and see how the accuracy is, and then we will do some recoil analysis. It's a good time to talk about these optics. This is the Mecanik M03. It's their competition offering with a window bigger than an SRO. It seems pretty slept on. Nobody really talks about it. But it's got an RMR footprint and it's got pretty clean glass, very clear emitter, looks great, gets bright. And on the Prime is the Mecanik M04. It's their new enclosed emitter, kind of like the HoloSun EPS. It's got very clear glass with almost no distortion. It's just become available now. They announced that it shot earlier this year. But I'd say it's definitely a rival for the EPS if it holds up to a bunch of shooting. But the EPS is one of my favorite sights. Let's see what we can get out of Mr. Prime here. This is the MC9 Prime with 115 SMBs at 25 yards from RS. And that is the Canik Combat at 25 yards. I did screw up one trigger pull real bad on the Combat, but that's pretty good. Let's talk about the triggers on these guns. It is the full, you know, TP9 trigger that is known and loved with the flat shoe on the Combat. The MC9 has a different trigger bar, but has the TTI shoe, same as the TP9. And the trigger's just a slightly bit heavier on the Prime than it is on the Combat. Not enough to where I think it's gonna make a difference, honestly. People geek out about that. When you're on the back of a galloping horse, you don't notice, you know, half a pound of trigger pressure. All right, let's see how this sucker goes. That's super easy in the hand. I don't know what it's gonna look like on slow motion, but the thickness of the grip really spreads it out nicely in the palm. It's got a super grippy grip. It's a little bit more aggressive than what's on the Prime. I'm expecting the Prime's gonna wanna rotate more because it has less mass on the slide because of its shorter barrel and because it's thinner and the traction's not as good. Again, don't know what the slow motion is going to look like. This has a lot more snap, but it's very manageable. Jumps higher, the dot does in the window, but it's, you know, louder for the shooter. That's another consideration. Definitely feels like it wants to rotate more. The Combat obviously is going to feel better in hand when shooting. Let's put it on paper and see what that difference looks like at a couple different ranges. Of course, the only way to test speed is bill drills at about 7 yards. So let's do it. That's only 4 rounds. I'm an idiot. I can't count. 5, 6. All right, bill drill. Again, let's go. That's a 166 with a typical split of 18's the fastest. Mr. Combat, let me make sure my timer's ready. Okay, it is. Here we go. All right, this is the MC9 Prime at 7 yards. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, roughly out to the knuckle of my ring finger to cover the group. And the time was roughly similar. Let's look at what the Combat did. The Combat, similarly, is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Its group is a little bit bigger, just beyond my knuckle on my ring finger. And what happened is that the Combat just does not require you to grip as hard. I was using better fundamentals on the little gun because I had to, but also the top of the MC9 grip has texture on it, whereas the Combat does not. So that texture goes all the way up basically to the underside of the slide, which helps with a small little flippy guy. The Combat doesn't have any texture in that critical point, so there is a point to the Prime. Let's go back and do it at 25 yards, see what happens. All right, back at 25 yards, I am going to react to a sight picture and try to be accountable for my hits. We'll see how that affects the time. And let's get into it. We'll go with the Combat first this go round, and we'll get the Mete a chance. Okay, it's a 339. It's a 51, 50, 47, 52, 51. So roughly half second. Mete. I didn't feel a lot slower. Let's see what the timer says. It's a 340, so a little bit quicker. 51, 54, 48, 50, 48. So roughly similar, but the hits are what kind of matters. Let's go look. This is the Combat at 25 yards. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All A-zone hits, which is good when you're being accountable for your hits. The times were roughly similar. 6 A's on the Combat. That big frame gives you more to kind of bear down on and keep it controlled at distance and still maintain speed. Whereas the MC9, you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 5 alphas, which is still very good. One just outside at roughly the same speed. Very, very capable, better central tendency out of the bigger gun. It's just easier to hold on to and pull the trigger straight to the rear. So for like when shots really matter, the big gun, surprise, is easier to shoot than the little gun. However, that's very capable performance from a gun that is, you know, a good bit thinner, a little bit lighter, and a little more concealable. So there's that. So shooting them side by side, I think at close ranges, it doesn't really matter. This is super capable for, you know, out to middle distance ranges. That's where this one starts to shine at longer ranges because the bigger frame is just more forgiving. It has a little bit more weight. It's an easier gun to shoot. Obviously, if you're going to pick something based purely around carry, you kind of only have one option because while the MC9 is still like a large concealed carry gun, it's still, you know, appreciably smaller because for all intents and purposes, the Combat is a 5-inch gun and how it handles, how it conceals, etc. It's light enough to where if you were dedicated to it and wanted to, you could carry it if you like carrying 5-inch guns. A lot of guys don't like that much muzzle in their pants, so maybe they're not going to do it. All you have to do is take the magwell off, which is easy enough to do. The MC9 is going to be a better gun. However, there's some of you guys who are probably thinking like between like an all-round like home defense and like range toy, they're both pleasant guns to shoot. The MC9 Prime is significantly louder due to the gas scheme with the ports than is the Combat. I know you're thinking they're guns, they're loud. Consider real quickly being inside a car or inside a hallway and having a gun go off. The Combat has, you know, one port putting it straight up This one's got 3 ports that are much closer to the chamber, so there's a lot more kind of pressure and sound coming out of those holes than there is on this one, about 4.5 inches down the barrel. What I'm saying to you is, even with EarPro, the MC9 Prime makes my ears ring at an outdoor range. It's only going to be worse at an indoor range. But if you're involved in like a self-defense shooting, I suspect and expect your hearing is going to be the last thing you think about. But consider that all indoor ranges, you're basically armored on all 3 sides of you, so there's probably going to be some sound reflection there. For recoil sensitive shooters, I definitely think the bigger gun is going to be a little bit easier to shoot and deal with at just kind of like poking paper sort of pistol. The other thing I noticed about the Prime, and this is true on all the MC9s, I have this problem because I have big hands, is I have a tendency to overhook the trigger and push the shots to the left with this pistol unless I very carefully place my trigger finger on the trigger and pull it straight to the rear. The bigger grip on the bigger gun fits my size XL gloved hands better. Big surprise there. I can say that the Mecanik sights seem to be pretty solid. They should get more consideration in sort of the budget optics game, even though they're high enough quality to where that's probably not a great name for them. The optics are probably as good a value as the pistols are. So there's that. If you want to check out my original video on the Prime or the TTI Combat, you can check those out here.